always am curious, what's the best way of starting this out? Just say hi. Like,
Yeah, hi. We're going to try this for the 900th time because we've literally tried to record this episode a million times and something always happens. So,
this is the third time we've started recording today, I think.
Today, at least. Yeah,
I think
for
it's the
sure.
third time today.
So basically, we sent that FOIA request in, and despite the fact that they fulfilled it for a major news outlet that published the exact same exhibits that we're asking for, except not the ones that we wanted, I didn't think it would be an issue to get our FOIA request back, but they made it clear that they intend to take up to 853 days to fill it, aka... we don't know if they're going to ever fill it or not, and we certainly don't have 853 days to wait and find out. So we are just going to continue on without that FOIA request.
Onward and upward.
Here we go.
All right. So it's a little bit of a different format today, obviously. We're going to be walking through some of the tech demos, and so we needed kind of a visual representation. The idea here is that we're going to be screen recording and bumping the mic and all of that fun stuff. Screen recording what's going on and putting this out as a video for people to see. And we're going to do our best to narrate along with what's going on for the audio podcast. Hopefully we don't have to re-record this and do just the audio. Hopefully this will work as is. Like we mentioned, this is the third time today we've been trying to do this. Ran into some technical difficulties before, and we'll get to all of that later. But the primary purpose of this first thing that we want to do is during the Josh Duggar trial, there was I believe it's a demonstrative aid, which is, we've gone over this many times, so hopefully I get this right. It is evidence. It's not evidence. The jury can't use it for deliberations, but it is presented to the jury as a way of kind of explaining how something works or how something was done or something like that.
Exactly.
It's an aid. Right. Yeah. It only took like 5 times of us going over this. This is a live demo, so what you see is what you get. Hopefully the web's all working and everything today. So
it's going to be a free-for-all. It's not going to be as, clean and crisp where we cut everything out. It's going to be like, hey, we want you guys to know we did not cheat. And by we, I mean Clint, because I'm here just for commentary. But this is exactly, he's going to create stuff that is very similar to what went on in court. And we want you guys to know that he is going to be debunking a few things. And we don't want you guys to think that we cheated or photoshopped or in any way altered. So, yeah, it's going to be raw and unedited. So you're going to get what you get.
Exactly. And we're going to have to do some best guesses because, again, we didn't get that FOIA information back. So a lot of this is going to be educated guesses based on what makes sense. We're not going to be able to do like specific version numbers down to the build because we just don't have that data. And there's really, right now, no way for us to get that data. So it is what it is. We'll just onward and upward. We'll move forward.
We're doing the best we can.
So the first thing we want to do is that demonstrative aid that Michelle Bush created. There was a big contention during that presentation where she claimed that the username Del_1 is not common, is not something that it would be used. And it actually struck me as interesting enough so that in my little notebook here, this is the first page of notes from the trial, and you can see no underscore in username ? Was one of the very first things that I wrote down in her testimony. That's not, from my experience, that's not a thing. Usernames can absolutely have underscores. So that struck me as very interesting that she said that. And they presented, I think it was actually evidence that they submitted where it was an error message from the setup that she tried to do that showed underscores are not allowed in usernames. And the prosecution objected to it, but the judge allowed it to be entered. So, again, struck me as very interesting for that. So I started kind of looking around and trying to figure out where that came from, and managed to find basically what caused that error and what Michelle Bush did incorrect when she set up her demonstrative aid, and what she should have done in order to do it correctly, so that you won't get that error message, because the error message has nothing to do with the actual process. It was just the methodology that she was using was incorrect.
And side note, this is the moment that we became buddies at trial, because when she put up her demonstrative aid and it said it couldn't be done, I was like, and by the way, I am not computer savvy, I was like, I think that's an alert saying that you can't use it for the next thing. Not that you can't name it Del_1, because obviously he did. That's been shown. I think that errors for something else. And the second they had a break, I turned around and I'm like, is this all smoke and mirrors? Someone help me out. And unfortunately for Clint, that person was him. So
yeah, sitting right in front of her, or right behind her, I guess. So the first thing we're going to do is the software that she used is called VMware. And I've got VMware Fusion, which is just a free version. You can install what's called virtual machines. So the idea of a virtual machine is, instead of me having to have a physical computer that's sitting here and install the operating system on top of that, I can create a virtual computer inside my computer, and it acts just exactly like a physical computer, but I don't have to mess with all the hardware, and it's, I can like take backups of it and restore those backups to go quickly back and forth between states and that kind of thing. Just makes this process much, much, much easier. So what we have here is, you can see just a generic install wizard. Let me drag this little folder over. So this file that I have here, this is Ubuntu 18.04.2. This is one of those educated guesses that we had to make, because we don't know the exact version of Ubuntu that was downloaded. This was the latest version that was available in May of 2019. So educated guess, I'm guessing this is the version of Ubuntu that was used. Without that FOIA information, we don't know for sure, but it's a safe bet that it is. So as we set up this aid, we're going to drag this over here, and you're going to see it's automatically going to detect Ubuntu 64-bit 18.04.2. We're going to go ahead and click continue. We've got this easy install option. So it's going to ask us, it's going to pre-populate display name, account name, and it's going to ask for a password. So here, I don't want this tied with me. So we know, well, as I accidentally exit that because I hit the wrong key. Live, folks, live.
The struggle is real. We're doing the best we can.
We'll set that back up. Okay, so here we're on the easy install screen. So I'm going to type in the display name as Del_1, because we know that based on the prosecution's evidence, that is what it was set to. So then we're going to go to the account name. And again, we're going to type in Del_1. And I'm going to go to the password. And as soon as I go to the password, I get an error message. It says Del_1 is not a valid username. The username must consist only of lowercase US English characters, numbers, 0 to 9, and dashes. Enter a new value. So for Michelle Bush's aid, she actually named the account Del1 with no underscore, and you can see if I do that, it works fine. Now the issue with this is, this screen right here has really nothing to do with Linux itself, with Ubuntu. This is a VMware feature. So you can see with easy install, VMware Fusion will use the information provided here to automatically install Ubuntu 64-bit from your installation disk and install drivers and optimize your virtual machine. So this is something that's built into the VMware tool. It has, like I said, nothing to do with Linux itself. If you are installing Ubuntu on physical hardware or using a different type of virtualization, this would not be an option. So the error that she got is very easy to get past. You just uncheck this checkbox and hit continue. And then it's going to ask you for, what's the other settings to create this virtual machine. And instead of using this, I've actually got a virtual machine already built on a server so that it's a little faster. So let me pull that up. Now this virtual machine has been created, but I haven't installed anything. It's just a blank machine. So here is the virtual machine, and this server that it's running on has a little bit more horsepower than my laptop here, so it'll help keep things moving along. Just looking at some basic settings, we have 4 CPU cores, 8 gigabytes of memory. It's a 10 gigabyte hard drive. It's got a standard network connection, and we have that Ubuntu 18.04.2 ISO. It's the exact same one that I had downloaded. It's connected right there. Everything else is a default setting. I haven't changed anything else. So we'll go ahead and we will power the virtual machine on.
And by the way, virtual machine is just like a computer within a computer. Like he is using his computer to basically look at a blank computer. It's a computer within a computer.
That's exactly what it is, yeah. So here, you can think of this screen right here, like if this was a physical computer, this would be the monitor that we're looking at. And it's going to take just a little bit to load. And there you can see Ubuntu 18.04, and it's going to make some really pretty colors while it turns on. And here we go. So first screen, we have the option of trying or installing. So obviously we know that Ubuntu was installed, so we're just going to go ahead and click install. It's going to default to our keyboard layout of English US layout, so we're just going to leave it like that and hit continue. For the type of installation, we're just going to leave it as a normal installation. Not going to make any changes here. Just leave it just like it is. Click next. Here's where we're setting up that hard drive. If you were doing this on a real computer, you would probably want to take a little more care than what we're going to do here, because like this says, this is going to completely erase the disk and it's going to install Ubuntu. Since I just created this virtual machine, I know there's nothing there, so I'm not worried about it. I'm just going to erase and install. This is just some technical details about the hard drive that has been picked. It does its thing. It's actually setting that partition up right now. That's why this part takes just a little bit.
So it's super easy to install. You're just basically clicking OK next as you would installing anything on a computer.
Yep, more or less. Here is the time zone selection, so it's saying where are you. So you can see it's defaulted to Eastern Time, New York. I can click here in the Central Time Zone, and you'll notice that anywhere in Central Time in the U.S. that I pick, it says Chicago. That came up in the case. There was a contention because one of the aids, I think that Detective Futrell had made, maybe. This was after I was there, so I'm not exactly sure what it was.
Yes, Agent Futrell, he had a demonstrative aid when he came back up to testify after Michelle Bush went. They called him back up to the witness stand, and he had demonstrative aids. And one of the things that Gail Fan pointed out was that the time said Chicago time, and he was asking him why it was set to that. And Agent Futrell was like, because I'm trying to make the virtual machine look as close to what went on in this case as possible, and so I clicked your time zone.
Yeah, that's just how we label time zones. The general idea is that not everybody knows what time zone they're in. There was a bill that passed the Senate today, unanimously apparently, they voted to make it daylight saving time year-round. So we'll see what happens with that, but time zones are kind of at the whim of each government, but pretty much everybody knows Chicago is a city close-ish to me. That's a large city. So they just call the Central Time Zone Chicago time. It's fairly common. You'll also see Dallas, stuff like that. Now here, this is where we're actually going to pick the username, the computer name, that kind of thing for this Ubuntu installation. So this is what you would see, again, if you were sitting at the physical computer when you're installing it on the hardware. So I can pick, like we did before, Dell_1, and you'll see the name, check. The username, check. The computer name, no. The computer name says may only contain letters, digits, hyphens, and dots. So what's going on with that easy install option is it's using that username that you provide for both the computer name and the username. And because underscores are not allowed in computer names, it throws an error. Now, underscores are allowed in usernames, so the statement that you can't have a username with an underscore is clearly wrong. Like it says right here that that's going to be fine. So the way to get around this error is to go clear all of this out, and we'll just name this test VM for virtual machine. We're going to give it a password, and I'm just going to use that infamous Intel 1988.
One we won't forget.
One we will not forget. So we'll hit continue, and we're off to the races. So it's installing now. It's going to download any required updates, and then it's going to do all of the unpacking and setting up the system and all of that type of stuff. Now, one of the things that gets brought up is the defense was constantly saying we need to follow forensics, everything. And I agree with that. I think that's a good thing that we need to do. Now, we'll get to it in a little bit after we get the Ubuntu installation configured. But one of the things that the defense argued is that the software that Josh used, the uTorrent installation, was not available in this Snap application store. So it wasn't very easy to install. It would have been very, very complicated. Somebody would have had to be a very advanced computer user to know how to do it. And that was actually one of the things that they questioned me about in my testimony is, did Josh know how to do this type of thing? And Michelle Bush, when she set her demo up, she actually had these commands. And I don't know if you caught this or not, SoJo, but she conveniently left the commands off the screen. So the recording was just this Linux install here, but she was copy and pasting the commands, so you never actually saw what the commands were that she used. Well,
also keyword copy and paste.
Right, yeah. Because she was talking about how they're very complicated. Nobody could remember what the commands are and just trying to make it seem like it was a very, very complicated thing. Well, I can show you what those commands are. It's these commands right here, 4 of them. It's very straightforward. This looks like it could be complicated, sure. But anybody who has done things with Linux is going to know how to do those first 4 commands automatically. That is very, very standard how that works. So we'll kind of walk through this process. So this first command, sudo, that is simply telling Linux that I am about to do something that requires administrative access. So it's going to check that you have permission to that. It's going to see if you need to type in your password to make sure that you're who you say you are, that type of thing. And then it's going to take the command that you type next, and it's going to run it as an administrator. So these 3 commands that say sudo, that's all it is that the next thing is going to be as an administrator. The next word in all 3 of these commands is apt. This stands for aptitude. Aptitude is the package manager for Ubuntu. And in this context, a package is, think of it like an installer. So on your iPhone, you go to the App Store, you download your app, and it extracts everything and puts an icon on your desktop, and you're good to go. So aptitude is kind of like a package manager, but for the command line. So I can tell it to go install this, and it will go download those files, and it will install it. This first command is update. All that's doing is it's telling aptitude, hey, go out to the package sources and just see what's out there. Get all the details on all of the latest packages so that I know what's available. The next command starts with sudo. Then it's aptitude. The third word is install, which should be fairly straightforward. It means we're going to install something. I want you to go look at your package sources that you have and go install something. And then the fourth word is wine64. So wine64 is a package name, and that package is the wine package, which is a software system that lets you run Windows applications on top of Linux. So by default, you can't run Windows programs except on Windows. You can't run Linux programs except on Linux. You can't run Mac programs except on Mac. So Wine is a compatibility layer that lets you run Windows programs on a Linux system. And the 64 just means that it's the 64-bit version. Bits has to do with memory addressing and the size of computers and all that type of stuff. It's just 64 bits is the current common thread. So that's all that means. The third command is exactly the same, sudo apt install VLC. VLC is a media player. It's fairly straightforward. It's a very popular media player. It's been around for a long. I think I've used it for a decade now at this point. It has some really cool features, like you can actually use it to convert media. It's really good at figuring out what kind of media a file is. So if you're not sure if it's like a file that doesn't have a file extension for some reason, you can use VLC to look at it, and it will oftentimes be able to figure out what kind of media it is and go ahead and play it. It's a very, very good program, and for the purposes of this demo, one of the things that it can do is it can play a file stream, which will be important later on. This last command is wget. So wget is a program that will download files from the internet. And we're passing wget-O uTorrent.exe. And that -o uTorrent.exe is saying the output of this command is going to be saved as uTorrent.exe. And then the next thing there is just https download hr uTorrent.com. That's just telling it what to download. So that's just the link to the download file. So this wget-o uTorrent.exe and then the link is saying go download this file, save it on the computer as uTorrent.exe. That's it. You run those 4 commands, and now you have Wine installed, which will let you run Windows programs. You have VLC installed, which will let you stream media, and you have uTorrent downloaded. The only thing remaining to do at that point, if you want to run, if you want to run uTorrent, the only thing remaining to do is just run the Wine64 program that we installed, and just do uTorrent.exe. That's it. Now, the reason that this looked so scary in court is all of these commands are very, very, very verbose, which means that they output quite a bit. There's a lot of writing to the console when this is done. So you type that one command, sudo apt update, and it's going to scroll down. It's going to say it's downloading things. There's going to be progress bars, all that type of stuff. You type sudo apt install Wine64. Well, Wine has a ton of what we call dependencies, which are programs that have to be installed for Wine to install. And so it's going to go out and it's going to download, I think I did this afternoon, and it's like 173 different programs that it's going to go download. So it's just constantly sitting there and scrolling. I think it took, in court, it was like a 5-minute demo that she did, something like that, and it was just the output scrolling the whole time. It's really scary looking if you don't know what's going on, but it's just these 4 commands. That's it. It's very, very straightforward.
And if I needed these 4 commands, like, I could probably just Google them as well. Like, if I couldn't
absolutely,
find them on here, I could just Google this.
Yeah, and this is the manual way of doing it. Like, if you didn't know what you were doing, you could say, you could Google something to the effect of, how do I install VLC from the command line on Linux? And that's almost guaranteed to get you this command right here.
And just like she said in court, copy and paste.
Just copy and paste.
For anyone wondering, is it really that easy? It absolutely is. Me, who is not a computer whiz, who does not know how to do weird, intense, crazy, complicated things on the computer, Googled this and found a ton of different ways to do it, as well as step-by-step instructions and even YouTube videos giving step-by-step instructions. So it is absolutely that easy to do. If you don't believe us, just Google it yourself and you will see all of the different ways that the answers are one click away.
So while we are continuing to wait for the setup to finish.
I love the fact that it's a squirrel, by the way.
Actually, that just finished. So instead, let's keep going here. So we'll tell the computer to restart. And while the virtual machine is restarting, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to eject the CD so that it's not plugged in anymore. So I just switched the ISO file to unmounted. And see, now it's telling me to do that. That's why I need to do it. I'm just going to hit enter. And there it goes. So now Ubuntu's installed. It's going to boot up. And we're going to be presented with a logon screen.
And this is the Linux partition.
This would be the Linux partition, yes.
This is the whole Linux partition right here.
Mm-hmm. And here you see we have the login screen with Dell_1 as the username. I click on that. I type in Intel 1988. And it's going to log me in. And it's going to load. And there we go. So now I am running this Ubuntu VM. I'm logged in as Dell_1. And we're solid. So we've just proven that absolutely you can have an underscore in the username. That is completely a thing.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt. Absolutely works.
Which I always wondered why they argued it anyways, because they had proof that that was the name. It was just trying to argue that it was going to be some huge complex thing to make that underscore work. And as you all just witnessed, that's clearly not the case.
So the argument that they were trying to go for was that in order to add a user with an underscore, you had to have a very high level of technical competency, which is clearly not the case. Like, it's literally a wizard that you just type in what you want and you're done. So let me quit this little welcome thing. Now, one of the downsides of doing this demo is we are running the version of Ubuntu that was released in May of 2019, or just before May of 2019. So you can see there's updates available. So the problem is, if we update this, then it's not going to be the same. Things aren't going to work how they worked 3 years ago at this point. So we don't want to upgrade to 20.04. We're going to stay on 18.04. However, there is a problem. Computers today are built off of, a large part of what makes things work is certificates. And certificates are big, long strings of numbers. They're big, huge prime numbers is actually how they work. And what happens is there's some complicated math formulas and everything, and basically they create these certificates using math. Those certificates have time limits on them, and those time limits expire. So right now, if I launch the Snap Store, which is labeled Ubuntu software, you can see this gobbledygook error message. It says that it's unable to download updates. SSL handshake failed. That's the key right there that's telling us what the problem is. The SSL handshake failed. And you don't have to understand that. You just know that's a certificate error. So my suspicion when I looked at this was that if I just updated the certificates, then I could use the Snap Store and everything would work fine. because I didn't want to do all of the updates, because then there could be some questions of maybe some other stuff changed and it's not quite the same as it was back in 2019. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here. I'm going to launch the terminal, and you're going to get to see just how scary some of these commands look. So here we have the command line, and we're going to run this first command that I have here, this sudo apt update. So sudo apt update, and hit enter. It's going to prompt me for my password. I'm going to type in Intel 1988. You're going to see here's my progress bars. It's saying it's downloading things. You can see there's a timer here. It's telling me how fast the transfer is going. It's telling me where it's downloading things. So imagine this is getting played for you in court from an expert who's saying, look how complicated this is. Look at all of this stuff that's going on. So here, like that update command is done. So now we've downloaded the latest package definitions. The next thing we need to do is we need to update the certificates. So we're going to sudo apt install, and the certificate package name is CA certificates. And so it says it's going to upgrade this package. It's going to download stuff. You have this progress bar here. Things are moving along. So imagine seeing this for 5+ minutes, and it's just constantly going. It looks like the computer's taken over the world. Like, it looks very, very complicated. But for our purposes, that's it. We're done. So we're going to restart the virtual machine. How was that? Do you feel like that was a simplified version of what we actually saw in court?
Yeah, because, here's the thing, too. When they were explaining it, and by they, I mean the defense, it was almost like you would have to know all of that to type, when clearly the computer's inputting most of that, and then you fill in where you need to in certain areas, or if you want to change, certain things for the code, whatever. But it was almost presented, or at least I interpreted it when it was presented, as if you needed to know how to do all of that.
All of those commands that were constantly scrolling. The implication was that she was doing a lot of that, when in reality she wasn't. She ran a single command, and it just ran forever because it's a long command.
Right.
So now we've restarted. So let's go ahead and launch the Ubuntu software application. So here we're downloading the catalog, and notice we did not get that SSL error. So that worked. So first things first, and here's hoping this works this time, because they've been messing around with this. And of course, it's not there right now. Okay, so, maybe it's still downloading.
Like we said, we've tried to film this particular episode a multitude of times, at least 3 just today, and every single other time, there it was. But today when we tried to do it, it was like, I'm not feeling like working for y'all today.
Yeah, so for some reason, uTorrent is not showing up in the interface right now. It's been intermittent the last day for some reason. We've got records, I've got it recorded of it actually working in the past. If anybody doubts it, I can publish that. But what we're going to do is, in the meantime, let me grab the correct URL. Snapcraft, that's what it is. So we'll just go to the website that has the uTorrent on it, because we did confirm that this works. Accept. So we're going to go ahead and install. We're going to tell it to view in the desktop store. And this is the weird thing. It's there. You just have to click the link that way. It doesn't show up in the search for some reason. So go ahead and tell it to install. Hi, Future Clint here. I realized while getting this ready to publish that I probably needed to provide a little bit of clarification around this part. During the trial, the defense argued that there was no evidence that the uTorrent application was available through the Snap Store, and so the part we just did, installing it that way, would not have been possible. They argued that that meant the only way it could have been installed was via those 4 complicated commands that we showed earlier. Even though those commands, once you understand them, they're not very complicated, what we're about to do is attempt to prove that the software was available through the Snap Store in May of 2019, so those commands wouldn't have been necessary even then. All right, so while this is installing, the big thing was, like, they were claiming this is how you had to install uTorrent. You could not do it any other way. There's no evidence that you could do it any other way. So, and they kept talking about follow the forensics. Well, there is a forensics technique. It's called open source intelligence gathering. And the idea there is that you use open available data sources to conduct forensics research. So you don't have to do like the detailed, like dive onto the hard drive and look at the bits and all of that type of stuff. You can just Google stuff. And if you know what you're doing, you can find plenty of things. So that's what Michelle Bush did, is she says that she followed the forensics. So here we have the entry in the Snap Store. So we can see last updated December 4th, 2020. So the question is, when was this published? How long has this been available in the Snap Store? So the first step is there is a website called the Internet Archive, archive.org. And this website is very, very cool. You can type in a URL and you can look at when that URL, when they found pictures of it. They take what they call snapshots. You see there's 665 billion web pages. So they take these snapshots of these web pages and then they archive them so that you can go back later and you can see what that web page looked at a point in time. So if we type in, well, if my computer doesn't autocorrect, io/uTorrent. So type in snapcraft.io/uTorrent, and you can see that it says it's saved 2 times between November 12th, 2020 and February 26th, 2021. So the oldest entry that they have is November 12th. So what Michelle Bush did is she looked at this and said, I don't have any evidence that uTorrent was available in the Snap Store earlier than November 12th, 2020. So the cool thing is, like I said, we don't just have record that it was there. We can actually go look at this page and see what it looked like. So while this loads, remember how the live page told us that it was last updated December of 2020. This archive page from November of 2020 tells us that it was last updated in June of 2019. So right off the bat, we're a good a year and a half earlier than what Michelle Bush was claiming, that she couldn't find any evidence that was published earlier. Well, this archive says that it was published in June of 2019. But June of 2019 is not May of 2019. So how do we know that it was available before May of 2019? That's where knowing how to perform proper open source intelligence research comes in. So it's very simple. This is a very simple explanation, but we can see that the person who is responsible for this package is Taki Raza. I hope that's somewhat close to being correct. The username is MMTRT. So I did just a simple Google search on that username, and it turns out that's a pretty unique username. And being somewhat familiar with the computer field, I was able to find a GitHub repository. GitHub is where a lot of programmers store their data. So here, this is the GitHub repository for the uTorrent package that is in the Snap Store, assuming that my internet wants to let it load. Here it is. So we can see that the last update on this package was December 4th, 2020, which coincidentally is exactly when the current live page says it was last updated. So we can look at the history, we can see there were some changes in January of 2020, June of 2019, March of 2019. We can see he's been working on it for a while. Now, the important thing is, if you come here, this is the readme.md file. So this readme is talking about using the Snap Store to install this file. It says you can install it using snap install uTorrent. It's got the information here talking about, you can clearly see it's pointing to Snapcraft. It's all of this type of stuff. Like, it's clearly talking about installing it from the Snap Store. So the question is, well, the thing is that this is the developer of the application saying you can install it from here. So what we can do is we can look at this readme.md, and we can click on it to open it in details. We can look at the history, and we can see this file was last updated in September of 2018, which means that in September of 2018, the publisher of this package was saying you could install it from the Snap Store. And I mean, to me, that says that it was available in the Snap Store.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things in trial, too. Like, this was an element that really bothered me. And it didn't really bother Clint, but it really bothered me because, of course, using that website is a fantastic tool. I love that they catalog all of the stuff. It's amazing. It's equivalent to, stalking somebody down on social media to find out who they were with and what they were doing and who they know and yada, yada, yada. But this is the computer version of that. My issue with it was when we were sitting in court, I was like, she is a computer expert testifying in a federal worldwide trial. Why didn't you just call the developer and ask if it was available? Well, I think the answer is obvious, but that was one of the things that bothered me because I was like, oh my God, what are you doing? Call the developer and ask.
Yeah, I feel like the answer to that is obvious as well. The problem...
You just proved the answer right there.
And we didn't call the developer, and we were able to prove that it was available. We were able to heavily imply that it was available prior to that date. I think the answer to why she didn't call the developer is pretty straightforward. She would have gotten an honest answer. And an honest answer would not have helped their case at all.
No. I mean, you just took, 30 more seconds.
And I know that I've got these links. I've got these links saved, and I'm pulling this up, off the cuff. Trust me, it took about 2 minutes to track this down, and most of that was GitHub by default doesn't load all of the repositories, and so you have to click next and click next. That was most of the work actually finding this.
And by the way, she is a computer expert testifying in a worldwide federal case. So it's not like she's just some normal person searching the internet. Like, she's claiming to be a computer expert. She's certified to be a computer expert.
Right.
Well, you just saw another computer expert just solve that in 60 seconds.
Yeah, there were several things that were somewhat disturbing about the case, and that's one of them.
And that's a wrap for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope you guys liked that we did the fancy video, and I have a feeling that there is no way we will be able to go back to just audio podcast now. So thank you, Clint, for that. We're going to have to be bougie now. And that's a wrap. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will see you all on the next episode.